We know that, there's really no point of having something amazing if it's just going to sit on the shelf and collect us. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, just for a second, let's be honest with one another. How many times have we gone out and purchased something only to find the tag on there, maybe months later, maybe even years later? This has got to be a worldwide phenomenon, a shared human experience, if you will. Please tell me I'm not the only one on this. But in the same way, having great technology, it's fantastic. But unless lawyers use it, they just won't see the efficiency gains. So our next session will be highly beneficial as it discusses ways to adopt technology to get the results, get the benefits for you and for your team.
To the next session of the Changing Lawyer Live. This is titled Tech-Empowered Firms Are Enjoying Boost to Efficiency. I'm Curt Meltzer. I'm an evangelist with Litera, and I'm very excited to welcome our guests today. In alphabetical order, Rachel Broquard is the Service Excellence Partner with Eversheds Sutherland. Angela Dowd is the Director of Practice Innovation with Burns & Levinson. And Kate Simpson is the National Director of Knowledge and Practice Innovation with Bennett Jones. So we have 3 countries represented. Rachel's in London in the UK, Angela's in Boston in the US, and Kate is in Canada in Toronto. So we've got a multinational panel and a group of people who have tremendous experience in trying to get lawyers to embrace technology. So if you would please go in that order again, alphabetical order. If you could just introduce yourselves and say a little bit about why you're interested in talking about this topic today. Rachel?
Hello, yes, I'm Rachel Broquard, the Service Excellence Partner at Eversheds Sutherland. I am a practicing lawyer and have been an M&A partner at the firm until I stepped into this role in April 2020. Really excited to be here today to talk about adoption of legal technology because ultimately that's our raison d'etre. If lawyers aren't using the solutions that we are suggesting that they should use, then we are not helping them solve the problems that we're here to solve. So really excited to get into the debate today.
Thank you, Rachel. Angela?
Hi, I am Angela Dowd. I'm the Director of Practice Innovation at Burns & Levinson in Boston, Massachusetts. I have been with my firm for many, many a moon. I started actually in human resources of all places, and then been through various functions and places in IT and in the firm. And I think for me, that's part of the reason why technology adoption really resonates, is that there are so many business issues that we can assist with. And to Rachel's point, if we are not helping them adopt, to want these products, to use the products, for whatever reason that speaks to them, then how are we really helping our firms? So I'm really excited to be having this conversation.
Great, thank you, Angela. And Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Simpson. I am the National Director of Knowledge and Practice Innovation for Bennett Jones, a largely Canadian firm with a few international offices. And I'm excited to start this. My background is actually in user experience and information architecture. And so getting lawyers to use technology, there's a kind of an HCI element to making the technology as intuitive as possible and engaging, but there's also a lot that we can do to nudge behaviors to get lawyers to actually use technology that may not at its outset look all that intuitive. So also excited to be here today. Thanks.
Great, thank you all. Well, I've been in the legal technology space for more than 35 years and seen a lot of changes in that time. But I'm particularly excited about what's happening today. I don't know if we can call it a legal technology renaissance, because I'm not sure that there was ever a high moment, but this is clearly a high moment in terms of the amount of attention and money being thrown at solving legal technology issues and solving the problems that clients have. So it is a particularly exciting time, but all throughout these 35 plus years, we've had the same challenge. No matter how good the tools are, And no matter how much they address the business challenges, it can be difficult to get the lawyers in particular to embrace them. And so we're going to get into that today. So let's start off with the very first, very basic question, which each of you have touched on just a bit. Why do we care? Why do we spend so much time on technology adoption? It's not the sexy tech stuff that everybody gets interested in. It's actually the hard work of getting people to pay attention and to change. So why do we focus on this? And why do we care? Kate, would you mind starting us, please?
I'm going to go with the business reason first, which is it is the ROI, the reason that we're here. So we really care about adoption because our firms are making huge investments. This stuff isn't cheap. So we need the lawyers to use it to get some of that return on investment. So I think the major piece is actually a business reason that we need to show. And we'll talk about this later, but we track metrics to ensure that success, that we do measure success in terms of adoption and use of the technology.
Very good. Angela, are there other reasons why we care?
I mean, absolutely. I think that, oftentimes and almost always we're buying technology because it solves a problem for us, right? Like that there is some underlying reason. While it would be great to have as much money as I wanted to just buy cool things because they were cool, there's a business problem that we're trying to solve. And to Kate's point, the return on investment, we've identified this problem. So now we need to get people to buy into this so that we can fix the issue, through this technology.
Very good. Rachel, what are some of the other reasons?
Yeah, so Kate's touched on one of the key ones for me, which is the return on investment. Clearly, there's the need to use technology to reduce risk within our business, but ultimately for me, this is about using technology to augment the services that our lawyers are providing. We are not a technology provider. We are a law firm. And technology enhances the way we deliver our legal services, and ultimately we aspire to delivering service excellence to our clients by using best-of-breed technology, and therefore getting as many people across the organisation to buy into using the solutions to help them deliver better work to our clients is what we're here to really deliver.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to note that what we speak about a lot with people is improving end user happiness. A lot of the work that lawyers do is routine and boring, and their eyes bleed at 3 o'clock in the morning from reading documents over and over and over. And if there's a way to get rid of some of that boring work, make them more efficient, and let them get home earlier or get the work done in a more efficient manner and in a higher quality manner, that's important. So we care that we understand their pain, and we're trying to help them address those things so that they can enjoy their job more. And everybody wants to get paid to think and be creative and work with clients and collaborate and so on. They don't want to get paid to do nasty document review and things of that nature.
Absolutely. I think that you bring up a great point, is that our attorneys went to law school because they enjoy practicing law. They don't want to format documents. They don't want to have to do those, those what I'm going to call more maintenance items or things that are better done by technology. They want to practice law. They want to service their clients. They want to do those deep legal specific things.
Mm-hmm.
I was that lawyer in the physical data room 20 years ago. I was that junior associate sat there at 2 o'clock in the morning, pulling together these very manual DD reports. I'm so glad that our lawyers today do not have to go through those processes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about helping our people to thrive.
Yeah. It's funny, Simon Sinek, he's got this great book called Start With Why. And I remember doing this, when it first came out, and my why, like why I get up in the morning, why I do what I do for Bennett Jones, is that I want to improve the lives of lawyers. It is a hard world that our lawyers live in, and just making sure that they don't have the microaggressions that we have with technology, where you want to throw the printer out the room because why can't you see it? It's just sitting there. Why can't you connect? We want to solve some of those problems, and I think technology shouldn't be seen as an additional frustration. It should be seen as something that can kind of engage in a new way to the work that needs to be done. So,
and I think that technology has evolved to the point now where it's not something that we do to people, but it's something that we do for and with people, right? I mean, we all remember back in the days when it was, and especially for you, if you've done, UI, UX, it was definitely something we did to people. And there were times when it felt like you had to hold your arm up and the moon was in the right phase, and then magically it would somehow produce this thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and your demo sessions would start with an apology about why it doesn't work quite as well as you hoped.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Have you ever been in a demo when that didn't happen? Kate, I really love your term microaggressions. If they were only all microaggressions,
right,
life would be a lot better. Yeah. They rightfully so, they are under an enormous amount of pressure, and when the tools that we provide don't do it for them, it is extremely frustrating. And they're focused on client service and being responsive to the client, and we need to facilitate that relationship and their ability to deliver on their promises to those clients. So we understand those micro aggressions. I'm going to have to use that. So we talk about adoption, and most people think of it, I believe, as okay, we're rolling it out, we're doing some training now, and everybody should just start using this thing. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. Angela, when does this adoption process really start in order to be successful?
I think you really have to define the problem first, right? Like you can't have a solution if you don't know what you're trying to solve yet. What defines success? If you can't explain to people like what it is, then it really is that you've just bought something cool because you thought it would cool and you thought it would help. Like it was just awesome. And again, if I had that much money, that would be fantastic. But I think it really starts with defining what the problem is and having understanding who the people are, who your stakeholders are, and what their view of it is. Not necessarily in just the what's in it for me, but how do they view a problem? Because a senior partner is going to view it very, very different than a mid-level associate. That it may be a same issue, but very different sides of that same problem. And what is their connection to this issue?
Rachel, what about you? When does the process start for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Angela's touched on it absolutely. I mean, the way that I've seen technologies adopted rapidly is when they are addressing a real life problem and people are feeling the pain at the time that they are trying to find the right solution. And that's where you find rapid change and rapid adoption. But yeah, I mean, historically, we've seen IT departments try and impose tech on lawyers. And actually the lawyers need to be involved in the process from the very start, so that the people on the tech side and the people who are actually delivering legal services to clients really are talking at that very early stage, and that you're bringing their ideas on board. So if you leave it until you're ready to launch, you've probably left it too late to start the adoption. You've got to engage with their emotions at the very early stage, understand what they want, why they need it, what their pain points are, and really understand the human connection with the problem and why it is that they want that problem solved. And it could be because actually they've got a real desire to deliver a great service for a client. And for me, that is a real motivator for lawyers. They want to do great work for their clients. And if you can tap into that, then hopefully that helps you drive that adoption within your organisation.
Mm-hmm. I would add that there's a, when you're preparing for a new, you're putting a pilot together and you're figuring out the pain point, you're figuring out who's going to be on that pilot. You're also taking steps to identify your communications plan, your adoption plan, because you're thinking, well, what are possible reasons not to use it that people might bring up, so that you can build your communications plan about avoiding that very excuse, and understanding that different people have different ways of doing things, and so they may well adopt this technology and use this technology in different ways. And so what we need to do is for success in adoption, it's not just you have to use it and you can only use it in this one way for that necessarily to be adopted by all people. And so understanding who your audience is, and that different vintages as well as different offices may end up using the technology in different ways. So that conversation about adoption really starts for me before you even look at a tool, because you're constantly thinking, okay, so when we do get a tool, then we have to kind of push adoption. And so anything that we can find out about the tool or about how people currently work as we go through that process is key to when we've got past that pilot stage and looking for rollout.
And I have to say, to that point, there's also the managing of what the tool will do, right? Like I have found, at least in demos, and this is no slight to anybody, they all look spectacular and sexy, and they'll make us lose weight and give us massages and all sorts of things, right? Like the demos look spectacular. They're supposed to look spectacular. And sometimes, if you haven't made those definitions early and really identified the problem so that you can bring people back to the problem that you're trying to solve, you can have the shiny object syndrome, where all of a sudden, this no fault of anybody's, your stakeholders are like, oh, but it also does this, and this is something important. You're like, no, that is cool, but not important. There's a difference.
Big difference. I've been in many of those meetings when you're first talking about the problem and people already come with a solution. Well, we should buy X. Yeah. And that's not the kind of thing you want to get into, because they use X at Y law firm and it worked great for them, and our client said we should use Z, so that's exactly what we should use. Like, well, that's all great, and maybe perhaps we'll get to that point, but they're kind of jumping the gun on that, and setting, I think, unrealistic expectations when they say, well, we already know what we're going to use, and let's just cut to the chase. Like that they're missing a huge part of the program, and I think that's part of the job of the technologist to say, all right, let's embrace that and appreciate the input, but let's take it one step at a time. It's you don't want to put the cart before the horse.
You have to be very sensitive in that situation when a partner in the law firm has been approached by a legal technology provider, and they've reached out to you to say, here's a really great bit of technology that I think is really going to help me within my practice area, because it might be the first time that partner has engaged with the legal tech program and has started thinking about how they are going to change their practice and adopt new technologies. So you don't want to shut them off, but you do want to encourage that enthusiasm for legal tech, but being mindful of your overall legal tech strategy. So it does require a lot of thoughtful handling and care in that particular situation.
Yeah, and have you seen that the number of vendors approaching your partners has gone up recently? I am fielding, so even when the vendor already knows that we use a competitor product or whatever, they've still gone in to the partners. That can get quite frustrating, because then we have to have those careful conversations with those partners about the fact that we already actually have a piece of technology that can do what this vendor is saying that they want to do. So those numbers have certainly gone up.
I have seen that as well, though. To Rachel's point, I think it also gives an opportunity to have those conversations with perhaps stakeholders who may have been not as technologically eager in the past, is that, if you can have that conversation to say, hey, we actually have something that's similar. Can I schedule you with some time with our trainer to take a look at it? And is this a pain point you're feeling? Can we talk about this and how this is impacting your practice and why you think this would be a good idea? And maybe we can have a further conversation. So for me, maybe it's the size of my firm. I've really welcomed a lot of those conversations. They're time consuming. You do have to be careful about them. But anything that really helps people embrace technology more as a way to augment their practice, I'm always eager to start those conversations.
It can be a lot of fun if you're able to structure it properly. And you can make friends even though you might not think so. And I've had that experience where I have a confrontation with somebody and we both reflect on it, and then you become a lot closer and can get places. So it doesn't always take a straight path, but hopefully you get to the right place ultimately. But all of this change that's being introduced is not the only change typically at a law firm. There's all kinds of things going on. Like as a managing partner, you always have to balance, well, how many different buttons can I push here? How many different things can change at once? Not very many. So you have to set priorities. And there are other dynamics in the technology. There may be other types of integration that are going on, or maybe you're replacing one technology with another, and people have to learn new ways of doing things, and you have to build some sort of integrations and build it into the training programs and so on. So how do you balance those priorities, and how do you get others to embrace what you see as your priorities? Who wants to tackle that? Tough one.
It's a big challenge, and when I came into my role relatively recently, 18 months ago, we have a plethora of legal technology solutions at Eversheds. Sutherland is one of the world's biggest law firms. You can imagine that there's a lot of technology across our organisation. One of the things that we embarked on when I came into role is what I call Project Marie Kondo, which is named after that famous Japanese lady who goes in and sorts out people's wardrobes and declutters their houses. So Project Marie Kondo for me is around looking at our tech stack and working out which of those solutions are the ones that bring us joy and that we really love and that are going to maximize that return on investment. Identifying those technology solutions that have perhaps passed their best, have had their day, perhaps haven't been adopted as well as we would like. Perhaps it was a pet project of a particular partner who has now left the organisation. Because one of the things we talked about earlier was how early do you start adoption? And the adoption process takes a lot of time and effort. And we have limited resources. So how do we maximize our return on investment? Well, it's really focusing on those technology solutions that we think are really going to move the dial, deliver that return on investment and help us drive our business forward. So I think it's around focusing on those that drive that return. And then once you're moving away from the solutions that are not there, you're in then a better place to identify the gaps within your tech stack, and then that forms the strategy going forward. So that's the approach that I've taken. I'm really interested to hear the approaches from my fellow panelists.
Angela, you want to go next?
Yeah, I will say that, for us, there are probably two things that really dictate it. One is the sort of overarching goals of the firm, right? So if you look at the firm's strategic plan and where it's trying to go, that can really dictate some of where your priorities lie. And then honestly, for a firm my size, sometimes it's what's on fire, right? Like I'll use the pandemic, for example. Like and the pandemic is something in lockdown that has changed things for a lot of people. We were a traditional law firm. We worked in the office. We had desktop machines. We had probably 4 laptops in the entire firm, which most people are like, how is that possible? But that's just the culture of our firm. They very much valued this sort of work-life balance. People didn't live in the office for a bazillion hours a day. And when everybody went home on very, very short notice, we had to figure out how to make that work. And that really sparked a lot of changes in resources about what was possible. So that people suddenly, they didn't need the technology because it wasn't, they could just come in and we live in a city, everyone's very, very close. They suddenly embraced change. They were suddenly wanting change. They were suddenly wanting ways to collaborate, where before we could do what I call the sneaker network. We would stick our head down the hallway and we would sit in someone's office and talk and chat. And those are still things we want to do, but we want to do those things because those are things that are good for certain conversations. And now technology enables us to do things that technology is good for.
Mm-hmm. I think there is something in that that how it happens is different. I mean, I cannot, I could compare the different tools we bought over the last few years and the different techniques that each of them have required to get that adoption has been amazing. And it's less of a single playbook that you just open whenever you buy a brand new piece of technology. It's not like each technology requires a slightly different playbook to figure out full adoption or to hit success. And no one could have predicted that the pandemic would be one of those things I would put in my playbook. Another pandemic, please. Not really. I'm kidding. But a couple of our technologies were affected in a positive way by the pandemic. The fact that so my firm had already given out laptops over the previous year, and so we were all ready to just hopped it the moment that the government said go home. We all picked up our laptops and went home, and that was foresighted by our CTO. But what we hadn't realized was all of the manual processes that we were trying to automate, such as closing folders, the closing mechanics. We were trying to automate and use technology to make that smoother and faster. And we'd had amazing adoption amongst some of the junior associates. They were like, I'm never going back to the old way of doing it. But we still had a huge holdout of people who were still doing it the old way. And obviously the fact that they were now locked in their homes, we were like, I can't really do it the old way because I need access to a very powerful printer if I'm going to do it the old way. So suddenly they were like, tell me how to use this new tool. And they're all very excited about using it. And then on the other side, we have things like the contract companion in Word that people kind of did know about but didn't know about, and suddenly there became a need for self-serve. People actually wanted to know what technology communications they may have missed over, and they were suddenly much more interested in, give me a rundown of all the things in my Word ribbon that I have, but I've forgotten that I don't use anymore, or I've forgotten about. And so we were kind of hit twice. Once through the pandemic from you just can't do it the old ways now, moving to the new ways, and some where people were more interested and more open to learn about the technology because they wanted to be a tiny bit more self-serve from home because they didn't have the raft of people just outside their door that they could yell at to get help with, and so that we did get quite a lot of quite more adoption because of this remote work new world.
Yeah, it has been a catalyst for positive change as well as all the negativity.
Yeah, let's focus on the positive. Focus on the positive.
Yes, there's hopefully we look for the silver linings, and it has. The other thing that's been wonderful is IT as a group has probably gotten more praise since the pandemic started than they've ever gotten before, because their work kind of saved the day and became very visible very quickly. So that has been nice. I think that's kind of wearing off though. You each touched upon communications and what a critical role it plays. Kate, you talked about how different people need different things and work in different ways, and learning happens in different ways for different people. There are tactile learners, there are audio learners, there are visual learners, and everything in between. And so there's different ways of educating people and communicating with them about what's going to happen, what is happening, what's been happening, and what continues to happen. So can you talk a little bit about some of the ways that you've addressed that need to continually communicate the value? Rachel, could you start us on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the learning and development process, it's continuing, and because there's so much change in this space, we've got to continually communicate with the business. So a couple of things that I've been doing. One is a Tell Me a Story campaign, which is getting partners who have engaged in using technology for a particular client on a particular piece of work to do a short Tell Me a Story video that we can share with the rest of the partnership. Because when partners hear from other partners some of these success stories, they're more likely to have their eyes opened and want to engage and deliver the same level of service to their clients. I've also just come out of the back of Techtober, which has been a large learning and development program that we have run across the firm. It's kicked off with a 1-week virtual conference for all of our lawyers, where we did a big learning and development piece around some of those technology solutions that have come through the Project Marie Kondo program, so that as many people as possible are aware of them and have been able to learn about them. We had taster sessions, we had deep dives, we had practice group people come and talk about the application of those technologies. So we had great engagement across the business. I think we had nearly 70,000 page views on our Techtober platform, which was great to see. Then coming out of the conference, we ran a global legal hackathon where we invited teams to tackle any particular client challenge that they wanted. We directed them in certain areas if they wanted to have some prompts, some ideas, and gave them access to a sandbox so they could go away and play with some of the technology solutions. And we've just come through our week of judging with our 10 finalists to be announced next week. So that's how we're trying to make it a little bit more fun and engaging for people across our firm.
Kate, how about you?
I still have a lot of work with the communication to do, I think. But you know, the rule of 7 is something that I kind of adhere to a lot. It's a PR marketing tool of you need to touch people 7 times before they internalize any message, and that those messages need to be different types of messages, so different media, different formats, different times, and there is a kernel of truth with it that you do need to attack the communication on a multitude of fronts, and so I love the idea of at Eversheds, like the idea that you have a month where you can't miss the communication that there's a specific campaign going on, and I think that's a great one, and we're always trying to find new ways of communicating some of the things that we want people to use, and we have to come up with quite clever ideas to do it. So on the internet, you know, the little messages that pop up to tell people how to use things. I think we have the technology now to reach more people in different ways, and I think we have to be quite creative when thinking about communication and adoption, and recognize that, as Rachel said, we're not technologists, we're lawyers, and we're serving our clients through legal advice, and that means that the technology is an enabler, and so we have to recognize that they may not ever be expert operators of the technology that we're rolling out. So how do we ensure a level of competency that just because they only use the technology once a month, they could still use the technology, and they don't have to learn it over and over again because they don't use it on a regular basis. And so I think there are we have a huge student training program. We work very closely with professional development to take through each new cohort as they come into the firm, and we have quite a lot of repetitive meetings with those juniors as they learn the practice of law, but also the technologies that can help them with the practice of law. And that has been very, you know, as we've seen each new year come through our training programs, we see the benefit of that repeated communication and repeated training sessions. So keep going, keep repeating your messages. It works.
Exactly. Angela, anything to add there?
You know, I think that I'm really going to echo what Kate and Rachel said. You know, I view it as very much like a bit of the fitness world, right? So that everybody has what motivates them different, and that's different. So, you know, whether that's you want to run a marathon, that means you want to, you know, perhaps lose a little of our lockdown weight, you know, whatever that motivation is different for people, and their formats are different. So, you know, the idea of running with people, it horrifies me. I would rather do it by myself with my headphones, and it's my own personal space. But some people love classes where they meet people, and how that message gets delivered really has to be customized for your audience, and you have to know who they are and what their motivations are, so that you can, again, keep on repeatedly bringing that message in different ways at different angles, so that they do internalize it.
Mhm.
I think I learned a lesson from Ralph Baxter, who was the chairman of ORIC when I first started there as CIO. And he'd been managing partner for more than 20 years. And he said, in relation to motivating partners to get things done, so they're all very successful people. Most of them are type A. They've always been at the top of their class and very successful in whatever undertaking they choose. And so you can rely on their competitive instincts. So he would say, I can get lawyers to do things for a $10 Starbucks card that typical millionaires wouldn't care about. and I think that is a really good motivator for people. They are competitive, and they don't, you know, you're not trying to defeat the other person. You just want to excel. And so if you can create some sort of competition, or at least some sort of recognition, peer recognition, through contributions, as you said, Rachel, with partners or champions of products making videos to say how they've utilized it and how it's aiding their practice. I think that's something that a lot of people would embrace, and of course you're not going to get everybody. Nothing you do is ever going to get anybody, and I think that adoption metric, which we'll talk about in a moment, is an important one to talk about. But I think as long as you can reach people, they might not be able to get to use the technology themselves, but if they understand that it's there and how it can make life better for somebody at the firm and how it can improve your level of client service, then they can perhaps direct someone else to utilize it. And that's something I'd always found was valuable for, you know, older generations perhaps not being interested, but just understanding, oh, we've made this investment and here's the payoff, and this is how your team should be using, somebody on the team should be using it. Then that makes them feel better, like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to use it as long as I know that somebody is doing that. And if they just ask, did you use this? That's really all they have to do to get more people to use it. So there's every firm, though, as has been said, culturally, every firm is different, and you have to figure out what's going to work best for you. But there is a never-ending supply of options. So let's get into metrics now. How do you measure success? How do you anticipate the success? You know, what are you looking for? How do you determine what you think will be successful? And then how do you measure it as time goes on? And how do you tweak the program based on the metrics that you find? Kate, could you start us on that, please?
Yes. Identifying what success looks like is really important to begin with, because, you know, we're not talking about systems and tools that every single person at the firm will use. You know, our tools are used by a targeted select audiences, and so identifying who those are is so key up front, because then you can measure your success. So, for example, one of the issues we had when dealing with closing folders was, how can we tell what success looks like? We would have to know how many deals were closing full stop across the firm, and then figure out how many of those closed deals were being used by closing folders. And that data is really hard to gather. And so we, you know, there is a data project ongoing so that we can identify all of that. But understanding that closing folders is not going to be rolled out to the litigators is a key part of what then your percentage of success when those numbers start coming in. So there is you can't go a whole panel presentation without mentioning the word data and the number of data projects that we've all got going on. But I'm not going to talk about any of those data projects, but identifying what success looks like. Are you saying it's going to be 80% of all closed deals should be used through closing folders, or is it 70%? Like, your aim has to be good, and then you have to set up the usage metrics to show that you've hit that. And some vendors are slightly better at that. I'm seeing that vendors are increasing their level of tracking that you can now do in some of the tools, which is great from just 5 years ago, because we need that. We need to be able to show our leadership that the technology is indeed being used. And so identifying what you're looking at. So we produce quarterly reports that show not only trend lines, but we can also dig into who's using it and why, so that we can track at a more granular level, but also over time what that looks like. Because some quarters will go down and some quarters will be higher than others, and you can't see that in isolation. You really need to be able to get the trend lines to be able to compare across quarters, across years. But again, if you haven't identified what that successful metric is going to look like, that KPI, then you're not going to get started. So it does take a lot of work, and as I said, that you need the data projects to be ongoing at your firm in addition, because some of the data isn't just being pulled from the tool itself. It is about the deals that you're actually doing as a firm.
Sure. Angela?
I'm really going to echo again what Kate said it's about scoping in the beginning, about knowing what success looks like, but also knowing the problem that you're trying to solve. To Kate's point, oftentimes we're rolling things out to 6 people. It's not going to an entire firm. It's not even going to an entire practice. But let's say it's just going to the docketing staff, and what it's doing is it's reducing the number of hours. It's reducing the number of errors. It's reducing, knowing what defines success in the beginning, what your scope is, lets you say, yes, only 6 people in our entire firm use it. But what it's done is it's saved them, 8 man-hours a week doing this. And now we have better data. We have better quality of less errors on X, Y, and Z systems downstream. These are the things that make this project successful and why it was worth that money. Because again, return on investment. This is what we're trying to show again and again.
Absolutely. Rachel?
So I agree with what my fellow panelists have said, particularly around measuring that return on investment and tapping into what you were saying, Curt, earlier around that competitiveness. Perhaps gamifying the return on investment between practice heads, etc., is something that can work. But it's not just about the return on investment. There are other metrics that you need to be looking at. And for me, client happiness is a really key part of that. And we think about, electronic signatures, and we introduced them back in 2016 as an organisation, and we started to use it. Ultimately, it was the pandemic that drove widespread adoption of that solution across the profession. And the reason for that was because the pain of not adopting that solution was greater than the pain of adopting it. But actually, thinking back to why we introduced electronic signatures in 2016, we wanted to think about how we could deliver a better solution to our clients. And I remember we were closing a deal shortly before Christmas, and we had got many of the documents ready and lined up and signed, and the GC was on a plane back home to see his family. And the lawyers on the other side phoned up and said, actually, we need to make a change to this document. We can't date it. And if we had not implemented electronic signatures, when that GC landed, they would have had to go on into the office, printed out the document, signed it, scanned it back before they could go home to their family. And the fact that we got that GC home to their family early for Christmas, for me, was a really successful outcome.
That would have a very positive impact on your on your realization and the retention level for those clients. Both those things, retention and realization, will improve hopefully when we use these tools properly, and hopefully that increases the firm's margins and its overall profitability as well. And it can be challenging to define that and to allow the agreement to say yes, the technology increases the profitability of the firm, but using these other metrics can do that. Well, we're about at the end of our time here. We have covered a lot of ground. There's quite a lot more to cover, but if you could give me, I'll put you under pressure here. 30 seconds. The most important thing you recommend to people to try to get people to adopt new technology, and I'm going to start with Angela.
Know what problem you're trying to solve. If you know what problem you're trying to solve, you can tell a good story, and a good story will take you so far.
Very good. Rachel.
Don't give up, keep iterating, and you'll get there.
Very good. Kate.
I think I go back to the playbook, which is that each new tool requires quite a different approach, and you need a creative and catalog of approaches for success. So don't try the same thing over and over again expecting a different outcome, but have a range and try different things with different tools for different audiences. Recognize the differences among us.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all so much, Kate, Angela, and Rachel. I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us today, and I'm sure our audience does as well. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the Changing Lawyer Live Summit.
Thank you.
Long.